Hello and welcome to Get Rich Slow, the podcast that challenges the conventional get rich quick ideology by exploring what authentic success really means and how you can achieve it. I'm Hannah Martin, the founder of Talented Ladies Club, and today I'm joined by Sally Baker, a senior therapist, published writer and media commentator for an episode on toxic positivity. So hi Sally.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I am really looking forward to this one. But first of all, I just want to ask a question I ask everybody, and that is, what does success mean to you personally?
Okay, great question. And I think it's something that we have to, or I have to, and I've had to quite recently reevaluate, because what felt like I wanted to be successful and to be successful 20 years ago or even 10 years ago has shifted and changed now. So for me today, success means saying no more often than saying yes, and stepping away from things, abdicating responsibility, and just really focusing on the areas that I want to do.
Brilliant. That sounds really important. So we were talking about toxic positivity today. So first of all, what is it?
Toxic positivity is the mindset of only allowing yourself to feel positive emotions and to ignore, avoid, deny any negative feelings that you might have about any situation.
Okay. And so what is the difference between a healthy positive outlook, which is, I presume aspirational for most of us, and toxic positivity? Is there a line that people cross where it ceases from being healthy to being unhealthy?
I just think we should all be allowed and encourage ourselves to feel the whole spectrum of emotions, so that then we can be genuine and authentic in our responses. So when we're clipping off the negative stuff, we tend to be also clipping off the really kind of enthusiastic, high-end good feelings as well. And we're just left with this tranche in the middle of not feeling particularly great about anything and not feeling particularly down about anything. So we're limiting our emotions, and that doesn't sound like it's a healthy outcome mentally for anyone.
So why is it so harmful? So you talk about it, so when we clip off these negative ones, we actually clip off the top ones as well. And is it harmful because we end up living a half life?
Living a half life, and it's also exhausting. If you look at the efforts that people have to go to avoid engaging with any negative emotions, it means that they're having to live in a state of high activity. So they are, massively hard workers, very driven quite often, or they're using alcohol, class A drugs, compulsive shopping, compulsive gambling, porn addiction, anything to constantly distract themselves. What would they have to look at if they paused? And what they'd have to look at, generally speaking, is the underbelly, the tough stuff.
And what can happen long term? So in the short term, if you're doing that, I guess it's just you're not going to have those feelings. But can that have a long term impact on our mental and physical health?
Yes, because I think it's the feelings, even if you're not expressing them or owning them, acknowledging them, still produce adrenaline and cortisol. So the stress hormones are still going around your body. And in fact, by not expressing them, even to yourself, then there's no outlet. It just circulates around on its own kind of contained loop. Not good. Okay,
so by avoiding negative feelings, it doesn't mean that we're not having them, because you say, because the cortisol and the adrenaline is in us. So the feelings are still in us, but we're not actually giving us a chance to sort of bring them out, examine them, see if they're valid, or even take positive actions to get rid of whatever's causing those feelings.
Yes, we're in complete denial, and that is tiring at the very best. And you'll come up with strategies, maladaptions to hide those emotions to yourself, to people around you. Yeah.
So what's a healthy response? So let's say you get a piece of bad news, something you tried fails, or, you get dumped, or, your business fails. What's a good response to that, rather than sort of putting those feelings away? What should we do with those feelings?
What we should do with those feelings is have an authentic response, an authentic emotional response. And even if that can feel in the moment quite negative, I mean, there's nothing wrong with negative emotions. We've become almost allergic to the idea of being sad or down or anxious, and we're afraid of those darker emotions, and we do anything we can to avoid them, and it builds them up so that we don't have any experience of them. Therefore, we don't have any coping strategies to get through these. All emotions, if we're allowed to feel them, will pass. We'll go through them. But while you're holding anxiety or depression or negativity or failure, you're empowering those emotions because you're giving them far more power than they actually deserve. They're just feelings.
That's an interesting thought, actually, a bit like that if you never deal with them, actually you're not learning any coping strategies.
No.
And so like when something, you might have smaller things happen to you that you just push away. And then when something really significant happens, it probably feels much bigger because you don't understand how to deal with those feelings and you've walked away from them your whole life. And when you can't avoid them, it must be a more traumatic.
And we only build up our resilience by testing ourselves, by being challenged. So all of these things help us. They build our resilience. We learn strategies that have worked for us in the past, and we can apply them again. And we're no longer afraid of failure, which means that we can try harder and, raise ourselves higher. And we're no longer afraid of risking ventures, emotional or professional, because we may fail. And it takes the heat out of all of that stuff.
I guess in a way it's a bit like, thinking of my daughter's got a sick mouse at the moment. And when children are young, we buy pets for them. And part of that is that they learn the life cycle and they learn about loss. And so that in smaller ways, and then they come through it and they say, oh, I had a horrible time. I felt really sad, but I then felt better. And so that when something else happens, you can think, I know I'm going to feel horrible, but it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to feel better. Yes,
exactly that. And families, you're right, absolutely right, to practice loss on a pet, on a little pet. A mouse is a 2-year lifespan, like a hamster. And children really mourn and have those authentic emotions of loss, and it is a learning curve.
Do you think at the moment that we're seeing, as a culture, do you think toxic positivity is increasing? I'm thinking particularly about social media and the influence of sort of lifestyle we have now, and that's all very much based on an image of a perfect life. And that we're consuming this content, and even though part of our brain knows that just because someone's saying they're happy and they've got this wonderful marriage and their perfect life doesn't mean it's true. But another part of our brain sort of holds that up as an ideal. Do you think we're living in a society where toxic positivity is more prevalent?
I think we're living in a society where we have epidemic proportions of comparison, comparisonitis. We didn't used to compare our lives or our Christmases or our Easter bunny outfits for our kids as much as we do now with social media. And however much we know front brain that those 125th of a second for a still is a curated image that may have taken several days to put together, there is a part of us that measures our own life experiences against those perfected images. And real life is often found lacking. But I work with a lot of influencers, and the reality is very different because, creating that facade of perfection's a terrible dilemma for people these days as well, is very wearing for their mental health. Just being able to keep kind of churning it up for themselves and presenting this amazing front. It's not healthy.
It must be doubly lonely. I mean, it's bad enough if you are not happy with something in your life. That's not a difficult thing. That's not an easy thing to deal with. But it must be harder when you're presenting a fake front and people think that you have something. It must be twice as hard.
I'm very interested in the whole influencer celebrity curve because they're often now making mistakes. So they start off and they can be quite humble and quite, they will be engaging and compelling to hook into and follow. And then as they climb up and become more prominent, they also take a step back from their followers. And that then hubris starts, the idea that they are bigger than the gods and know better and are not a mere civilian anymore, sets them apart, and they begin to believe their own PR, and that's the road to destruction as well. As we've seen quite recently, Molly May from Love Island, she got her fingers burnt on saying about we all have the same 24 hours. Kim Kardashian recently as well. And there's always someone who wants to come out with their side of the story as well, saying actually what it's like working with the Kardashians on a minimum wage isn't a lot of fun.
So yeah, it could be quite a dangerous thing as well. Then putting out a very toxically positive message when other people get exposed to the truth, or the media does. I also want to talk about how people can use toxic positivity. And I see particularly, I do a lot of investigation to the MLM industry, and it's used there quite a lot. This idea that if you are critical, you ask valid questions, and you are negative and a hater, and that the only way to be is relentlessly cheerful, relentlessly looking on the positive side. Do you see that as something that is used? Do people use toxic positivity to manipulate others?
Completely, and it can be much more sinister than the example you gave. For instance, I work a lot with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and they had the trauma of their experiences, but their trauma of disclosure. When people say, oh, well, you know, I don't want to hear about it. That's the first thing, that no one wants to talk about it. And then the other thing is that if you tell it to friends often want to fix you. So they'll minimize it and say, oh, it wasn't so bad, or it was a long time ago, or you must be over that now, or why are you still dwelling on that? And it's a way of invalidating someone's experience instead of holding a space and bearing witness. So a human need is to have someone bear witness, and that isn't to fix, it's just to listen and to hear you. So what should someone do in that scenario? Because I can see from the listener's point of view, there's two things that are probably going on. One is it hurts them to hear it, so they kind of want to minimise it because they feel better. And the second thing is they genuinely want their friend or relative to feel better, and they kind of want to fix them and go away because they want to believe that's all fine. So if someone does come and disclose something to you or talk about something that's very difficult to hear, what's an appropriate response or way of dealing with it? I think it's important to everyone in all aspects of society are more trauma informed than we currently are. So coming out with statements like, oh, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, actually isn't very helpful when some stuff, there is no upside to any of those experiences. It's just colossal amount of crap. You know, it's just been horrible. So you don't even have to say anything other than just listen. Just listen, because they're not coming to you to be given advice or to be fixed or for you to come up with a solution for them. Especially if they're disclosing for the first time, it's not unusual for, back to adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, the oldest person I've had disclose her abuse, and she disclosed to me for the first time, she was 68, and it happened to her when she was a child. So she'd gone 60 odd years of carrying that, and that's an unusual length of time, but it's not unusual to be in your 30s, 40s or 50s to disclose. And if you've been carrying something for that long and you disclose it to a friend, all they want is to be heard. Yeah.
And so what happens when people's feelings are invalidated? What sort of, do they then not want to share with anyone else?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it will delay sharing. It could delay it by another decade, or they'll take on board another layer of trauma because they're already sort of, by the act of disclosing, and some people never disclose as well, which is also personal choice. And no one should ever be forced to disclose. It's not unusual for them to that becomes part of the trauma load. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I tried it. I've tried to tell my mother. I tried to tell my friend or my neighbor, whatever, and it went really badly. I'm never going to do that again. And they'll just go deeper and deeper inside themselves, and that'll be more and more of a buried secret.
It's almost more confirming that there's something wrong with them, or what's happened to them is so horrific they should not be sharing it. It's not socially appropriate to, and
not safe. Yes. Completely not socially safe. Not a safe space.
And what should someone do if they feel that someone is using toxic positive towards them? So maybe it could be as serious as, I'm sharing something really important with you and you're my best friend or my mum or it could be even a less different scenario whereby actually you're just talking about it's not a terribly deep thing, but you're just not being met with what you need back. How should someone react?
I'm a great fan of intuition. And so with intuition, it's a bit like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And it's a hunch. So when you're asked to do something, try and give yourself enough space, even if it's just to take a couple of breaths. And while you're taking a couple of breaths, you're checking with your intuition. And that's just like doing a quick scan. Tends to be around chest and stomach. How do I feel about this? They've asked me to do this, or they've asked me to sign up for this, or they've asked me to pay this amount of money. How do I really feel about it? And if your gut's hunch says, I'm not comfortable with this, then you need to do a response that's kind of based on a stuck record, which is, I'm going to go away and think about this, and I'll get back to you. And then if they ask you again and they're pushing, you just do the same stuck record. I'm going to go away and think about this, and I'll get back to you. Give yourself a bit of space. So especially people pleasers, and often in the society now, we're trying to please people all the time. We like to say yes, and women in particular have an underdeveloped sense of no. Women really struggle with no. So a lot of the work with women clients that I do is strengthening their ability to say no. And what I get them to start practicing on, just do 5 small no's a day, and let's do that for a week and see how that goes. And it's really empowering to say no. It just is. And then, you're building up to the bigger no's in your life, the bigger things that you've just allowed to kind of wash over you, because we're not taught as children, especially female children, are not taught anything other than compliance. So to be able to say no is a strength. So checking in with intuition, giving yourself a bit of space to get back to them and make a decision, even if it's, I need to check my diary, whatever, or just to give yourself some physical space, and then practice your no's.
And I love that stuck record thing. Years ago in my teens, when I was seeing a therapist, I wasn't very assertive. I was very shy, lacking confidence, and they recommended a brilliant book, and I still use it to this day. I'll have a sentence, whether it's written in an email or spoken. I said, I'm not able to do that. Thank you for the whatever, and whatever they say. And what people do is they try to get you to deviate that, so you're left with nothing to say. Then you say yes, but all you have to do is repeat that same thing back again. And it's a quiet power in doing that, isn't there?
It's an immense power. Don't elaborate. Don't excuse. Don't change the words. A small phrase with your own language, so that you own that language and they are your words, makes it much more empowering than adopting someone else's stuck record little phrase. So find your own phrase that works for you, that feels authentic to you, and just stick to it and repeat it as often as you need to without going off-piste.
Yes. Yeah. And another thing they said, which I thought was interesting as well, is don't give reasons like, I can't come because then they go, well, I can't come because I haven't got a lift. Well, I'll pick you up. Well, actually, so just, I can't come. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. And add gratitude. Thank you for asking me, but I can't do that at the moment. Yeah.
And so we were talking there about, like when someone is putting an offer towards you. So obviously I work a lot and I see people business coaching industry, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about ethical sales and people pressurizing you into sales. How could you maybe recognize the difference between someone who is inspirational and maybe someone who is using toxic positivity to sort of recruit? Are there kind of key signs, the differences between the two, or not?
It's very prevalent as a practice, unethical sales, and really pressuring people. If what they say to you makes you feel bad, if what they say to you makes you feel that you're not deserving, that you are that you're failing, then I think that's a red flag, that they are using emotional buttons to trigger you into parting with money you possibly haven't got at that moment. Because they say things like, oh, well, clearly you're not ready to step up yet, or all of that stuff. And so they make it a deficit of yours, as opposed to you're not in a financial position to be able to take on whatever they're offering. And it's check your emotional responses. It's a bit like when you are spending time with people, when you come away from them, what's the emotions that you're left with? We've had lockdown, so, we haven't seen as many people as we're supposed to be seeing normally the last couple of years. And I had a breakfast meeting with a couple of women friends, and when last week, and when I came away, I felt giddy with the joy of it, and I was thinking, oh my God, that was just. I felt drunk. We just had breakfast, and I don't drink, but it was that giddy kind of euphoria of spending time with your tribe, and that made me feel good. And I thought that's what I have to look for with people that I want to spend time with. And it's so equally, if check in with yourself when you're being pressurized, how does that make you feel? And if it makes you feel less than happy, less than good and positive about yourself, then step away, because they're not your people. They're not your people.
I see a lot of sort of shame-based marketing that, you know, if you're big enough and if you're not ready to take this step, then there's something wrong with you. It's like I say, it's a deficit of yours if you don't want what they're, and even what they're selling, if you don't want the lifestyle. Are you not ready to play big? That's another thing, you know, and that's why I ask at the beginning of this podcast what your version of success is, because I feel like we've aligned success with money, influence, followers, fame. And all of those things are quite empty, because money is only useful as long as you can afford to buy the things you need in life. And there's becomes a certain point where too much money actually causes you unhappiness. So I think sometimes, like, a lot of the messaging is aligned to the wrong ideas. Success, I think, is always personal and what we measure. And it's not always financial. Sometimes it's emotional. But I do think there's a lot of shame around not wanting what they're selling and not wanting what you're supposed to aspire to.
Yeah. And therapeutically, if someone wants to work with me therapeutically, and I have an initial consultation when I just talk to them, and if they go away and they don't want to do the therapy, then for me, I think that's fine, because either we're not a good match or they're not ready. I mean, what's the point of chasing someone up who doesn't want to do the work yet, or do the work with me? And I just wish them well and send them on their way, and they will find their person when they're ready. Like, we will find our way. We'll just find our way when we're ready.
Yeah, this came up in another podcast. I was talking to someone about sales, and he was saying, like, you never pressurize someone into the sale. Allow them the time to walk away and think, because you don't want the wrong client. You don't want to work with someone who's not going to get value from you or benefit, and you're not going to enjoy. And I worked with someone once who said to me that I don't let someone off a call unless you've got their credit card details. And I never did that, because it would break any trust I had with that person. So if they said, yes, I want to work with you, I said, fine, like, I'll send you the details later. And that allows them a pause. But to kind of say, well, give me your credit card details, it feels a bit like you're a number on a spreadsheet to me. I just want the money. Yeah.
It's the same in all of our transactions, whatever we're promoting and selling, really. I mean, mine is therapy, but it could be anything. But in the past, I'm running a list at the moment, like a wait list. But in the past, when I've wanted more clients, I've only ever said to the universe, send me clients who are ready to change. Because the idea of working with clients who are not invested in change is just undermining and debilitating. I don't want to work with clients who are not ready to change. So I know the clients that are ready to change, because they'll send me emails from different parts of the world, but at like 2:30 in the morning their time, because they've been scouring the internet and they've been looking for an answer. And then if they reach out, they're probably ready. And those are the clients where you've got them in that kind of golden hour, that golden part of their lives when they are really, really ready for change. And that's when we do the best work. And when people are ready.
But it's quite short-term thinking, isn't it, to just take someone on? Because if they don't get a great result, so first of all, they're not going to go out into the world and say, wow, Sally's amazing. But also, it's going to affect your self-confidence, because over time, you're not going to be getting results. So you're thinking, am I really a good therapist? Because none of my clients are seeing change.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I mean, people have got to be ready. And yes, there's no point arm wrestling someone into any arrangement.
No, absolutely. So we've touched this a little bit, but so negative feelings are sometimes healthy and important. Is that correct?
I think negative feelings are always healthy and correct. We sometimes tend to ruminate on negativity, but that's about our thinking styles. And no one teaches us how to manage our thinking. So if you tend to be an overthinker or a ruminator or a catastrophic thinker, so overthinkers and ruminators tend to think about the past, and that's another country. Ruminators tend to think about, or overthinkers tend to think about the present. So they overthink it so much they never actually get out of the armchair or the sofa, get up from the sofa. They've overthought it to such a degree that the time's gone by. And then future thinkers are often catastrophic. You know, when people think about the future, it very rarely ever goes towards the positive. And they go, well, what happens if this happens and that happens and that happens? And it becomes catastrophic. And that stops some people in their tracks as well. So it's really good to interrupt any kind of ruminative, overthinking or catastrophic thinking. And I get my clients to make the game show noise that was on a Family Fortunes, was an old game show back in the 80s, where if you got a wrong answer, the noise was, So I get my clients, when they find that they're ruminating or catastrophic thinking, they have to make the noise. If they're on their own, they can make it out loud, like, that's a crazy answer. That was a BS thought. And if they're in company, I encourage them to just make the noise in their head so they don't get dragged away by men in white coats. But it's a BS thought, so it needs to be interrupted and just stop yourself doing it. So, just that. I get whole families doing it to each other. It drives them nuts, but they love it.
So negative thoughts per se are not bad, but thinking styles can be bad. And obviously, if you find yourself dwelling in negative thoughts and not able to move past them, it's worthwhile seeking help to help you learn new thinking styles.
Yes. But start with the noise. Yes. Do a bit of that.
That's a good test. Yeah. And so this is a big question, and it might not be a simple one to answer. It might not be an answer for it, but what kind of emotional state is healthy to aim for? And so, for example, and I read this in one of your blogs, which is why it inspired me. And this is something that I've learnt myself through life as well. You know, we talk about wanting to be happy, which is quite a trite kind of thing, but ultimately that's what we all want. Is happiness a state to aim for, or is there something else that we should be looking for?
Well, interestingly, according to Maslow, a famous psychotherapist, we have a pyramid of need, and at the bottom is sort of, shelter, warmth, food as you come up the pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid isn't happiness. The absolute apex of the pyramid isn't happiness, but it is self-actualization. And self-actualization is different for everyone. Mm-hmm. So self-actualization might be to be self-employed, to be financially independent, to live on an island, or to be part of a, cohesive, happy, healthy family. Whatever it is, whatever your self-actualization is something to strive towards more than happiness, which for most people is only ever fleeting. And happiness tends to be looked at, you can sort of see it in family photographs or holiday photographs, or when you look through your phone, you can look at, oh gosh, I was really happy then. But it might not be a state that you recognize when you're actually in it. Mm-hmm. But to have happiness as your end goal, I work in London, so, the Krishna devotees that go up and down Oxford Street with their little symbols and chanting Hare Krishna. And I used to think to myself, well, if that's happiness, if that is it, I don't even want it. If it means I've got to do that, fill my head with that, then I'm out of the game anyway. It doesn't matter. So happiness, what do you have to... Happiness can feel very transactional. What do I have to give of my up to be happy? What do I have to take on board for other people to be happy? Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably healthier emotionally to concentrate on one's own self-actualization.
Mm-hmm. And is it maybe like contentment and a peace, like to go to bed at night feeling at peace with what's happened in the day? But to go back slightly to that happiness thing, and we're talking about toxic positivity, isn't that kind of really what like the influencers are selling? They're selling that fleeting moment of happiness, and with the illusion that that's their life is a one note kind of emotion, and that's all there is. And it's, but obviously they don't. They have real lives. But is that what we're selling? Toxic positivity is selling a fleeting thing and telling people they can have it permanently,
and that anyone can achieve it if you have these things, and they're external things. And what we learned through COVID and the pandemic and lockdowns was not one of us missed things, and no one needed any more things. But what everyone really sorely missed and grieved for was connection, human connection. And I think human connection can make us happy. Being with people who feed our hearts and feed our souls can make us happy. And we can really kind of relish and enjoy being with those people. But it's rare that it's geography. It's rare that it's location. And it's rare that it's, I think it's probably impossible that it's a thing. You know, we do a lot of online shopping and online browsing and then shopping. It takes up a lot of time. It tends to be procrastination. Once we've made the purchase, we forget we've made it. I mean, you know, everyone knows Amazon boxes are arriving. You think, oh gosh, what did I actually buy at 2:30 in the morning? All that stuff goes on. So we actually know that happiness isn't equatable with stuff.
And that's also a high, that there is that high of you've got that purchase, then there's the high when the parcel comes and you open it. And then there's that flat low again. And the only way to recreate that high is to make another purchase, isn't it?
Yes.
There's I love the Human Givens approach to mental health, and they have like the 7 basic human needs. And what's interesting, like one of them is about obviously physical wellness, but the rest of them is all about people. It's all about you know, connections with people and being part of something greater than yourself, and giving and receiving attention. It's all about, as you say, it's our connections with other people, and being seen for who we authentically are, and then seeing others for who they are as well.
So when we're coming back to genuine happiness and genuine emotions, then being able to express our genuine emotions with a little bit of a filter. You know, if you've ever had a friend who has no filter and whatever comes into their head comes out of their mouth, that can be really tiresome as well. I say about my husband that he has no filter. Like, what happened? You know, when did you not get the filter? Because if he has a thought, then he expresses it. And sometimes it would be better if he didn't. So I think it's great to have authentic, genuine emotions, but have some empathy and emotional intelligence to decide when it's worth sharing those thoughts.
That's a good piece of advice.
Yeah,
Finally, so we've covered a lot and there's lots of advice in this. If you were to leave people with some top tips to help someone be positive and enjoy a healthy emotional state, and again, I know that's, you could probably talk for 5 hours about that, but what's your basic, if someone's listening to this and thinking, you know, I want to be emotionally healthier and feel a bit better, what are some of the things they could do?
Change their brain chemistry by creating dopamine and serotonin and all the feel-good hormones, and that takes 20 minutes of activity. And that's, so don't go out for a 50-minute walk, go out for a 20-minute walk, try and go somewhere green, do things like that, you know. And then that's a great way of changing your emotional state, and it's measurable because you will feel measurably better. And then back to Maslow's pyramid of need, really, it's very difficult to have really good mental health if you're not sleeping properly. And if you're struggling with nutrition, poor nutrition or very highly restricted nutrition, those are very difficult. And I do believe from my work that we have to manage our mental well-being. All of us have to manage our mental well-being. And it is about all of putting those things in place, you know, like sleep hygiene. If Arianna, she used to be called Arianna Huffington, if she can sleep at night in her bedroom without her mobile phone, I think the rest of us could probably do that too. We don't need to have it tucked under our pillow. And there was an incredible percentage I read recently about the number of Americans who look at their phone during sex. Like, please. What is that about? What is that about? Unless they're looking for inspiration, but I mean, really. Or checking the positions. So put out electronics, just put them away and make more human connection. Now that we're able to go back out and about in the world again, let's be more with our people. And they're not generally speaking either our family. We can have our chosen family. We've got our birth family, but we've got our chosen family. And we need to see more of our chosen people.
And I think something that I noticed from lockdown is that, 'cause obviously you stay in contact with people that you know, but you realise how many fleeting interactions you might have with a butcher or with the person you always pass on the street corner, that all these add up to actually really important connections in your day, don't they?
They really do. They enrich us. They are all the threads of our tapestry that we have been denied, and we've sorely missed them. And there was a whole low-level grieving as well as the people, we lost, but there was a low level grieving for the lives that we lost, the richness of the lives that we lost. And that's been replaced with levels of social anxiety because we're out of practice. 2 years, we've it's almost like a big backward step that we need to kind of recalibrate and give ourselves practice in small ways to get back to being very comfortable with just our lives, just living. And we can be choosy too now. We can think, actually, I didn't like working 5 days a week and schlepping into the office and leaving home at 7:15 in the morning and not getting back till 8 o'clock at night. And now I've got these other options, and embrace them, take them. If we've got ways to enrich our lives, then that's what we should be doing.
Brilliant. Words of wisdom. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting talking to you. If people want to find more about you, where can they go?
So my website's called workingonthebody.com, and have a look at that. And I'm in the press as much as I can be. So yeah, Sally Baker.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sally.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.